I didn't know I was being set up. I thought I was being rushed. That was the difference. We weren't in a courtroom. We weren't at a police station. We were in a private office inside the company's building, the kind reserved for paperwork no one ever reads carefully. Glass walls, neutral furniture, a sense of urgency that made everything feel official. My mother-in-law sat across from me, calm as ever. A thick folder rested neatly in front of her. "This is just internal documentation," she said. "It needs to be signed today." Today. The word had been repeated enough times to feel non-negotiable. "The auditors are finalizing things. We need consistency in the records." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "There are discrepancies, nothing serious, but they need to be clarified." Her eyes met mine. "And since you're in the corporate records as an executive officer," she let the sentence hang. Like the rest was obvious. Consistency. She slid the folder toward me. I scanned the first page. My name was printed at the top. Full legal name, correct spelling. That alone made my stomach tighten. "What exactly is this?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "Standard company formalities. You're listed as an executive officer, so it's procedural." Executive. That wasn't new, at least not on paper. Titles had been moved around months earlier, quietly, without much explanation. I'd signed something then, too, something I was told didn't mean anything. I flipped another page. There were numbers, large ones. $10,000 appeared in bold inside a financial table. My heart skipped. "This isn't a loan," she said quickly, as if reading my mind. "It's just acknowledgement of transactions that already happened." Acknowledgement. I hesitated. "Why am I signing this?" She leaned forward slightly. "Because you're family," she said, "and because this protects everyone." Protects who? "I don't see my husband's name anywhere." She waved her hand dismissively. "That's intentional. The fewer people involved, the cleaner it is." Cleaner. I didn't like the sound of that. "Does this make me responsible for anything, does it?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she gathered the pages neatly, tapped them into alignment, and stood. "We're going to have these notarized," she said. "That way everything is properly documented." That's when my chest tightened. "Do we need to do that?" I asked. "Yes," she replied smoothly. "It's already scheduled." We walked down the hall to a small office where a notary was waiting. He greeted us politely and asked for identification. Everything felt too fast. The documents were placed in front of me. I reached for the pen. "One moment," the notary said, raising his hand gently. "Before you sign, I need to review something." He flipped through the pages carefully, much slower than I expected. Much slower. My mother-in-law shifted in her seat. She said lightly, "This is just to verify signatures." The notary didn't respond. He stopped on one page and frowned. Then he flipped back, then forward again. The air in the room changed. "Is there a problem?" she asked, her voice still pleasant. He looked up. "I just want to confirm something before we proceed." He turned the document toward her, not me. Her. "This section here," he said, tapping the page, "assigns responsibility for authorization of these transactions." She nodded tightly. "Yes, that's correct." He adjusted his glasses. "And that authority is linked to the person who approved them." "Right," she said. He paused. "And that person is you." The room went silent. She blinked. "What?" He continued calmly, his tone professional but firm. "The signature she would be providing here does not make her responsible for these transactions. It confirms that the transactions were executed under your authorization." He let that settle. "In other words," he added, "she would be witnessing that you approved everything, not assuming liability." Her face drained of color. "No, that's not." He adjusted his glasses again. I'm afraid it is. My hands went cold, not from fear, from realization. The notary turned the page so I could see it. To be clear, he continued, if there's an investigation into these funds, legal responsibility falls to whoever authorized the transactions. He touched the document with one finger. And these documents confirm that person was you. Absolute silence. I felt my heartbeat in my ears, not panicked, aware. She hadn't brought me here to help the company. She had brought me here to be the scapegoat. And in her rush to pin it on me, she'd overlooked the one thing she always assumed she controlled, the fine print. My mother-in-law opened her mouth. Nothing came out. The notary closed the folder calmly. I'm going to need a moment to document this properly, he said. She stared at him, frozen, because she finally understood. In her haste to blame me, she had signed her own confession, and now it was documented, witnessed, recorded, irreversible. By the time she realized what she'd done, it was already too late. Before you continue, subscribe to the channel for more real stories like this one. You're probably wondering how I ended up in that office, how someone ends up sitting across from their mother-in-law, hand hovering over a document worth $10 million, not sure if they're about to save the family or destroy their own life. Let me tell you something. It didn't happen in a day. It happened over 2 years, one small compromise at a time. When I married into the family, I thought I understood what I was joining. A successful company, a strong woman who'd built it from nothing, a husband who respected his mother's business instincts. What I didn't understand was that in her world, family and business weren't separate things. They were the same thing, and she controlled both. My mother-in-law didn't ask for trust, she assumed it. Within 6 months of the wedding, she brought it up casually over dinner. I'm adding you to the corporate structure, she said, like she was offering me coffee. I put down my fork. What does that mean? She smiled. Just a formality for tax purposes. You'll be listed as an officer. An officer of what? The company, she said simply. It doesn't change anything, just makes paperwork easier. My husband nodded like this was completely normal. Maybe it was. I signed the documents that weekend. She walked me through them quickly, too quickly to read everything carefully. It's standard, she kept saying. Everyone in the family has the same setup. I didn't ask who everyone was. I didn't ask what standard meant. I just signed. That was my first mistake. Not the biggest one, but the first. Over the next year, my name started appearing in places I didn't expect. Internal memos, corporate filings, financial documents. When I asked about it, she'd wave it off. You're already listed, it's easier this way. Easier for whom? She never explained. My husband didn't see a problem. My mom knows what she's doing, he'd say whenever I expressed doubt. And maybe she did. That was the problem. She knew exactly what she was doing. I started noticing a pattern. She hated documentation that required explanation, hated delays, hated anything that needed more than one signature. The fewer people involved, the cleaner it is, she said once, reviewing a contract. Cleaner. That word came up a lot. She controlled information like currency, gave it out sparingly, only when necessary, always on her terms. Important conversations happened verbally, never in writing. We need to move quickly on this. It's better if we keep this internal. Trust me. And I did. Because what else was I supposed to do? She was my husband's mother. She'd built a successful company. She'd been doing this for decades. Who was I to question her? 18 months after I joined the company, at least on paper, things started changing. She mentioned an audit. Casually, like it was routine. Just the government being thorough, she said over dinner. Nothing to worry about. But her tone had shifted. She started calling more often, asking where I was, whether I was available, whether I could help with something quick. The documents came more frequently, always urgent, always time-sensitive, always already reviewed by legal. I signed them, every time, because that's what I'd been trained to do, not through threats, through pattern. I started noticing something else. My husband's name didn't appear on most of these documents, just mine. When I asked why, she looked at me calmly. "Because you're already on record," she said. On record. I didn't know what that meant. Not then. 3 weeks before she called me into that office, I finally asked my husband directly, "Why is my name on so many company documents?" He seemed surprised by the question. "You're an officer," he said. "That's normal." "But I don't actually do anything." He shrugged. "My mom handles the operations. You're just there for structure." Structure. That word stuck with me, because I was starting to realize something uncomfortable. I wasn't part of the structure. I was the structure. The thing she built around herself to make everything look legitimate. I wish I could say I confronted her then, that I demanded answers, that I saw through it all and walked away. But I didn't, because by that point, I'd spent 2 years learning that questioning her made you the problem, that doubt was disloyalty, that if you didn't understand, it was because you weren't smart enough, not because she wasn't being clear. So when she called me that morning and said we needed to handle some internal documentation, I didn't hesitate. I showed up. I sat down. I trusted her, because she'd spent 2 years teaching me to. That's the thing about manipulation that no one tells you. It doesn't look like manipulation. It looks like efficiency, like family, like trust. You don't realize you're being positioned until you're already in place. And by then, walking away feels like abandoning everyone. So you stay. You sign. You trust. Until you're sitting in an office, staring at a number that makes your stomach drop, finally understanding what you've been part of. Not a family business, a strategy. And you weren't the beneficiary. You were the insurance policy. When the notary stopped me that day, I felt 2 things at once: relief and rage. Because I finally saw it clearly. Every document I'd signed, every title she'd given me, every time she'd said, "Trust me," it had all been leading here, to this moment, where she would hand me responsibility for something I never authorized, something I never even knew about. And if that notary hadn't read carefully, if he hadn't stopped to question, I would have signed my name to her decisions. I would have become the person on record, the one who confirmed everything, the one who couldn't say she didn't know. You asked how I ended up in that office. Here's the truth. I walked in willingly, because she'd spent 2 years making sure I would. What she didn't count on was someone else being in that room, someone who actually read what I was signing, someone who understood what it really meant. And by the time she realized her mistake, it was already too late. The audit didn't arrive like a storm. It crept in quietly. At first, it was just a word my mother-in-law mentioned more often: audit, always followed by reassurance. Routine, she said. Standard. Nothing unusual. She said it casually, like she was talking about a dentist appointment she didn't feel like going to. But the way she moved changed. She became more precise, less patient. Meetings started earlier.
Conversations ended faster. Answers were answered with fewer words. She stopped tolerating hesitation. I need this today. This can't wait. Just sign and send it back. There was always a reason why later would be too late. She started asking me to come in more often, not to meetings, not to strategy sessions, just to handle something quick. Quick never felt quick. The documents grew thicker, the language more technical, entire paragraphs designed to exhaust rather than explain. Whenever I slowed down to read something carefully, she watched me with an expression I hadn't seen before. Not anger. Assessment. Like she was recalibrating. "You don't need to get into the weeds," she said once, gently taking the document from my hands and flipping past a section I was reading. Legal already reviewed that. I didn't know who legal was. I noticed something else, too. She stopped involving my husband entirely. At first, I thought it was coincidence. Then I realized it was deliberate. When he asked questions, she reassured him separately. When I asked questions, she reframed them as impatience. "He worries too much," she told me once, smiling. "You're better at seeing the big picture." The big picture always seemed to require my signature.
I started receiving emails late at night, subject lines marked urgent, attachments with file names that blended together, versions, revisions, final. When I didn't respond immediately, she followed up with a text. "Did you see my email? We need to keep momentum. Delays make auditors nervous." Auditors. That word stopped feeling neutral. I asked her once what exactly they were reviewing. She looked at me calmly. Cash flow timing, allocation, internal approvals. That last one lingered. Approvals. She began asking questions that didn't feel like questions. "You remember approving that allocation, right? You were aware of those transfers. This was discussed already." Each time I hesitated. "I don't remember," I said carefully. She never corrected me directly. Instead, she reframed. "Well, you were included," she said. "You're on record." On record. I noticed how often she used that phrase now, like a spell. She also became meticulous about one thing: consistency. Make sure your answer matches what's in the documentation. Stick to the language we used before. It's important we're aligned. Aligned with what? I asked my husband again if he thought any of this was strange. He looked tired when I brought it up, defensive. "She's under pressure. This is just how she handles stress." I wanted to believe that, but stress doesn't usually make people reorganize reality. I started keeping my own notes, dates, documents, things she said that didn't quite add up. Not because I thought she was doing something illegal, because I felt like the ground under me was shifting. One afternoon, I asked her directly if I should have my own lawyer review some of the paperwork. Her expression changed instantly. Not to anger, to offense. "Why would you need that?" she asked. "I just want to understand what I'm signing," I said. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "If you don't trust me," she said slowly, "that's a bigger problem than paperwork." The room went quiet. I felt the weight of that sentence. Trust wasn't being requested. It was being enforced. After that, she stopped asking. She started instructing. "Sign page 7. Initial there. Send it back within the hour." The documents were always framed as confirmations, acknowledgments, clarifications. Never decisions, never responsibility. But I began noticing a pattern in the language: authorized by, approved under authority, executed pursuant to, words that pointed backward, towards someone. She once corrected me when I used the wrong phrasing in an email. "Don't say 'I approved,' say 'it was approved.' Passive voice. Clean." I asked her why. "Because it's more accurate."
Accurate to whom? 2 weeks before she called me into that office, she asked me a question that stayed with me. If anyone asks, she said casually, you were aware of the transactions at the time, correct? I hesitated. I was aware that things were happening, not the details. She nodded. That's fine. It didn't feel fine. I realized then that she wasn't trying to convince me of something. She was rehearsing me, teaching me what to say, what not to say, where the edges were. I still didn't think she was planning to sacrifice me. I thought she was trying to protect herself. There's a difference, or so I told myself. The day before the meeting, I almost called a lawyer. Almost told my husband I needed to stop signing things. Almost said no. But I didn't, because by then, stopping felt like stepping off a moving train. When she called me the morning of the meeting, her voice was calm. We need to finalize some internal documentation, she said. It won't take long. I didn't ask questions. I didn't hesitate. Because she had spent months shaping the moment where I would stop thinking and start complying. What I didn't know was that the paperwork she handed me that day wasn't about consistency. It was about distance. About placing me just close enough to the decisions to absorb the impact, and just far enough away to say I had agreed. The trap was ready. I just didn't know I was already standing in the center of it. The first threat didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like advice. She called me the evening after a long day of documents and emails, her voice softer than usual, almost maternal. I just want to make sure you understand what's at stake, she said. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, laptop still open, unread attachments blinking on the screen. Understand what? I asked. She paused carefully. Everything, she said. Your life, your marriage, your future. I didn't respond. She took my silence as permission to continue. You've built something here, she said. Stability. A family. That doesn't happen by accident. Family. That word again. I don't want you to make decisions that could jeopardize that, she added gently. Decisions like what? She sighed. Like refusing to cooperate when the company needs unity. Unity. Another word that didn't mean what it sounded like. That night, she didn't mention documents, or auditors, or signatures. She mentioned immigration. Your status is still tied to your marriage, isn't it? She asked casually, like she was asking about the weather. My stomach tightened. Yes, I said carefully. Why? I just think it's important to be realistic, she replied. Investigations complicate things, especially when spouses are uncooperative. Uncooperative. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, she escalated. Not directly. Strategically. She asked to meet for coffee, just the two of us. No documents, no folders, just conversation. She chose a quiet place, public enough to feel safe, private enough to speak freely. I spoke to someone I trust, she said, stirring her drink. They mentioned that in situations like this, families can get scrutinized. Scrutinized. For what? I asked. For alignment, she said. For consistency. There it was again. She leaned in slightly. If auditors feel like people are withholding information, she continued, they start asking why. And if they don't like the answers, she added, things move quickly. Quickly how? I asked. She looked at me for a long moment. "Marriages don't survive that kind of pressure," she said quietly. There it was. Divorce. She didn't say the word. She didn't need to. A week later, she brought up our children, not as a threat, as a reminder. "You know how these things look on paper," she said one afternoon while we reviewed yet another set of documents. Custody, stability, financial responsibility. She glanced at me. "Judges care about who appears reliable." Reliable. The implication settled slowly, like something poisonous dissolving in water. "If there's an investigation," she continued calmly, "they look at everything: work, finances, home life." She closed the folder. "I'd hate for misunderstandings to affect the kids." My hands were cold. "You're saying this could affect them?" I asked. "I'm saying," she replied calmly, "that situations like this have consequences beyond business." That was the first time I understood exactly what she was doing. She wasn't threatening to take anything. She was threatening to let things happen, to step aside, to allow systems, legal, governmental, familial, to do what they do best when presented with ambiguity. She was offering herself as the only barrier between me and chaos, and all she wanted in return was cooperation. After that, every conversation carried weight. Every request came with an invisible asterisk. Sign this, respond to that, confirm this language, or else. She never raised her voice. She never put anything in writing. Everything was said in tones that sounded reasonable, caring, even. "I'm trying to protect you," she told me once, her eyes steady, "but I can't do that if you don't help me." Help me. I tried to talk to my husband, carefully. "I don't like how this feels," I said one night. He looked exhausted. "She's under a microscope. She's just trying to get through this. She's talking about immigration, about custody." He frowned. "She wouldn't do that." "She's already," I replied. He shook his head slowly. "You're reading too much into it." Maybe I was. Or maybe he didn't want to see it. The pressure increased. She began framing things as ultimatums without using the language of ultimatums. "If this doesn't get resolved," she said one afternoon, "external parties will get involved. If that happens," she added, "no one will be able to control the narrative." Control. That was the real word. I realized then that the documents weren't the endgame. They were the lever. What she wanted was something much simpler. Silence. Agreement. A name on record that wasn't hers. She wanted to create a version of events where responsibility was shared just enough to blur the edges, enough to say I knew, enough to say I agreed, enough to say I participated. And if I refused, then I would be the obstacle, the unstable element, the uncooperative spouse, the risk. She said it plainly the last time we spoke before the meeting. "If you don't sign," she said, her voice calm, final, "I can't protect you from what comes next." Protect. As if she hadn't been the one building the threat. As if the danger existed independently of her. I nodded, not because I agreed, because by then I understood the stakes. Immigration, children, marriage, all lined up like dominoes. She didn't need to push them. She just needed me to believe she might. That was the morning she called and said we needed to finalize some internal documentation. That was the morning I walked into that office, not because I trusted her anymore, but because I was afraid of what refusing might cost. What she didn't anticipate, what she couldn't control, was someone else stepping into the room. someone who wasn't invested in protecting her version of events, someone who read carefully, and everything she'd built to pressure me into silence collapsed the moment he spoke. The office felt smaller than it should have, not because it was cramped, but because everything in it seemed designed to move me forward. The table was already set. The documents were stacked neatly. The pen was placed exactly where my hand would fall if I sat down. My mother-in-law arrived first. She always did. She stood when I entered, smiling briefly, like this was a formality we'd both agreed to. No tension, no visible urgency, just confidence. "You're right on time," she said. I wasn't early, I wasn't late. I was exactly when she expected me to be. The notary greeted us politely, checked our IDs, and explained the process in a voice that sounded deliberately neutral. I listened, but the words slid past me. Verification, acknowledgement, witnessing. Words that had lost their edges after months of repetition. The documents were placed in front of me. Again, thicker than the last time, tabs marking pages I was supposed to notice, others I wasn't. My mother-in-law sat beside me, not across, close enough to see what I saw, close enough to intervene if I slowed down. "This will only take a few minutes," she said lightly. "We've already gone over everything." I opened the folder. The numbers were there. Clean, precise, cold. $10 million. Not highlighted, not emphasized, just present, like a fact no one questioned anymore. My heart began to race. "This is just confirming what's already been documented," she said, anticipating the look on my face. "You're not agreeing to anything new." I turned a page. Language I recognized now. Authorized by, executed pursuant to, in accordance with prior approval. Words that pointed backward, away from me. And yet my name appeared at the bottom. Signature line. Initials. Date. I hesitated. The notary cleared his throat. "If you have any questions, now is the time," he said. My mother-in-law smiled at him. "She doesn't." She turned to me. "Do you?" she asked. The way she said it made the answer feel obvious. I looked at the clock. I thought about immigration, about my children, about how easily everything could be reframed if I became the problem. "I just want to make sure," I said carefully, "that this doesn't make me responsible for decisions I didn't make." She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she leaned back slightly, as if the question itself was unnecessary. "This doesn't change responsibility," she said. "It just confirms alignment." Alignment. There it was again. The notary shifted in his seat. "May I?" he asked, reaching for the folder. She hesitated, just a fraction of a second. Then she nodded. "Of course." He flipped through the pages slowly, slower than she liked. I could feel it in the way her posture tightened. The silence stretched. He stopped at a page, went back, then forward again. The sound of paper felt louder than it should have. "Is there an issue?" she asked, her voice still smooth. "I just want to confirm something before we proceed," he said. He turned the document, not toward me, toward her. "This clause here," he said, tapping the page, "states that the person signing acknowledges that these transactions were authorized under the authority of the listed corporate officer." She nodded. "Yes." "And that officer," he continued, "is you." The room shifted. Not dramatically, subtly, like air pressure changing. "That's correct," she said. He looked at me then. "Do you understand what that means?" he asked. I shook my head slowly. "It means," he said, choosing his words carefully, "that your signature would not transfer responsibility to you." My mother-in-law's eyes flicked to him sharply. "It would confirm," he continued, "that you are acknowledging her authorization of these transactions." Silence. The kind that makes you aware of your own breathing. In other words, he said, you would be documenting her role, not assuming it. My chest tightened. That's not what this is for, she said quickly. He didn't argue. He simply turned another page. And here, he added, the language explicitly states that liability remains with the authorizing party. He paused. Which is still you. Her composure cracked. No, that's not. He adjusted his glasses. I'm afraid it is. I felt something settle in me. Not fear, understanding. She hadn't brought me here to take responsibility. She had brought me here to confirm hers, while believing I didn't know the difference. She stood abruptly. We need to stop. There's been a misunderstanding. The notary raised his hand. Once documents are presented for notarization, I'm required to review them fully, especially when there's a question of coercion or misrepresentation. Her face flushed. This is a private family matter. It became a legal matter the moment you involved me, he replied. She turned to me. You don't understand what you're doing. If you don't sign, you're putting everything at risk. I looked at the pen, still untouched. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about consequences she could unleash. I was thinking about what signing would actually do. I'm not signing, I said. The words surprised me with their steadiness. Her mouth opened, closed. The notary gathered the papers carefully. I'll be documenting this meeting, he said. Standard procedure. She froze. Documenting a what? She asked. An attempted notarization halted due to concerns regarding authority and representation, he replied. Her eyes went wide. I stood, left the folder where it was. As I walked toward the door, my legs felt weak, but my mind was clear. She had spent months building a moment where I would comply without thinking. She hadn't prepared for one where someone else did. And as the door closed behind me, I understood something else, too. The paperwork hadn't failed. Her plan had. Because for the first time, the record wasn't under her control, and it never would be again. The fallout didn't arrive with sirens or accusations. It arrived as emails, polite ones, neutral subject lines, requests for clarification. Not urgent, just unavoidable. 2 days after the notarization was halted, the company received a formal notice, a regulatory inquiry, preliminary, routine language, anything but routine. My mother-in-law didn't call me. That alone told me everything. Instead, she called my husband. I could hear her voice through the phone, sharp and controlled. This is being blown out of proportion, she said. It's a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding that now had a case number. Within a week, auditors requested internal records, transaction histories, authorization trails, email correspondence. Paper. The thing she trusted most, and the thing that betrayed her. The first interview wasn't aggressive. It was methodical. They asked me about my role, my title, my responsibilities. I told the truth. I didn't authorize anything, I said. I was listed, that's all. They asked about the documents I'd been asked to sign. I described them carefully. The language, the pressure, the timing. They took notes. A lot of them. When they interviewed my husband, the tone changed. Not accusatory, clarifying. What did you know? When? Who handled approvals? For the first time, he realized how little he actually knew. The auditors requested one thing specifically: proof of authorization. That's when everything unraveled. The records showed her name, her credentials, her digital approvals. Repeatedly. There was no ambiguity. The inquiry escalated. Accounts were frozen temporarily pending review. My mother-in-law called me then. Her voice was different. Lower, controlled, tight. "This didn't need to happen," she said. I didn't respond. "If you'd just signed," she continued, "this could have stayed internal, stayed invisible. They're going to misinterpret things," she said. "You know that." "I know exactly what they're seeing," I replied. Silence. She tried another approach. "You owe this family loyalty," she said quietly, "after everything I've done." "What you've done," I said, "is documented." She hung up. The next call came from our lawyer. She said, "They've expanded the scope. They're treating this as potential financial misconduct." Potential, for now. My mother-in-law was placed on temporary administrative leave, framed as procedural, non-punitive, but everyone understood what it meant. Control was gone. She showed up at our house unannounced that night. She looked smaller, tired, angry in a way she couldn't weaponize. "This is your fault," she said to me. "You could have stopped this." "No," I replied, "you could have." She turned to my husband. "You're letting her destroy everything I built." He didn't raise his voice. "I'm letting the truth exist." That was when she understood. The narrative was no longer hers. The investigation moved fast after that, too fast to contain. What had started as discrepancies became patterns. What had been internal decisions became unauthorized transfers. And what she thought she could blur with signatures stood out sharply under scrutiny. The documents spoke. And this time, no one was rushing anyone to sign. The moment she realized the investigation wouldn't stay quiet, she changed tactics. She stopped denying, stopped minimizing, started managing. She called relatives first, framed it as concern. "There's confusion," she told them. "People are misreading things." Then she called former colleagues. "Out of context," she said. "Technical misunderstandings." By the time she reached me again, she wasn't angry. She was careful. "I think we should coordinate our stories, for clarity." Stories, plural. "I don't have a story, I have facts." She exhaled slowly, as if disappointed. "You were always too literal. That's your problem." She asked me to reconsider my statements, to remember things differently. "You were aware," she insisted. "You agreed," she implied. "You benefited," she suggested. Each sentence tested a boundary. Each failure made her more precise. She contacted my husband next, late at night when people are tired and more willing to listen. "You don't understand what they're doing to me. They're turning routine decisions into crimes." He didn't interrupt. "They're building a case," she continued, "and your wife is helping them." That was the first time she said it plainly. Helping them. He asked one question. "Did you authorize those transactions?" Silence. Then, "I did what was necessary." That was the end of the conversation. She tried pressure through proximity, showing up unexpectedly, leaving messages that sounded like warnings, reminding us of everything she'd given. "I made your life possible," she said once. "Don't forget that." I didn't respond. The last attempt came disguised as compromise. "If I step down quietly, this can all end." I looked at her. "You don't get to decide that anymore." That was when she finally understood. Control wasn't slipping. It was gone. The investigation didn't end with a single revelation. It unfolded, slowly, thoroughly. What the auditors found wasn't one mistake, it was a system. Patterns of authorization, repeated transfers, decisions made without oversight. Her name appeared everywhere. Not once, consistently. The company board suspended her indefinitely, publicly framed as administrative, privately understood as removal. Accounts were unfrozen selectively, operations continued without her. She wasn't arrested, she wasn't paraded, but she was finished. The settlement came months later: financial penalties, permanent restrictions, mandatory compliance oversight. No admission of guilt, no denial either. Her legacy reduced to clauses and conditions. My husband resigned shortly after, not out of loyalty to her, but out of refusal to inherit something poisoned. We moved, changed cities, changed routines. Silence replaced vigilance. The final call came unexpectedly. "She never thought you'd let it go this far," she said. "I didn't take it anywhere. I just didn't stop it." She laughed softly, bitter. "She trusted me," she said. "No," I replied. "You used me." She didn't argue. That was the last time we spoke. Sometimes I think about that moment, the pen, the paper, the room where everything could have ended differently. If I'd signed, my name would have lived in those records forever. Instead, the truth did. And it turned out the thing she feared most wasn't exposure. It was being seen clearly. If this story shocked you, there are more like it on this channel. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. Thank you for being here.